You good, baby.
Thank you, man. Thank
All
you.
right, man. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Rolling with the Punches. Today we have a real special guest. He is one of the best authors out there in boxing. He's one of the most respected, and we are just so happy to have him. We're going to dig into some deep questions with him. We want to know who he thinks is the best out there, who should be fighting who. We're going to get into some nitty-gritty here, man. And we got two top dogs here, Dave Trujillo from House of Pain out here in Temecula, and the one and only, the world champion, Mighty Michael Chando. Welcome, Dougie Fischer. Thank you. Ring Magazine.
Pleasure having you.
That introduction. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
Right on, Dougie. So, man, hey, first of all, we thank you for taking the time, and I know it's late and midweek. We're passing this hump day today, but we just want to get started by asking you, and this will be my first question, then I'm going to ask you a question that Dave from Fort Lauderdale, Florida asked, and he said, do not forget to ask him. So I'm going to ask him on his behalf after I'm going to ask you this question. Right now with boxing, with COVID and everything that's going on right now, and all the rumors that are going on right now, do you think we're going back to the bubble here soon?
Oh, gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. It does kind of seem that way with the Delta variant and with these spikes and all. What I think is going to happen is we're not going back to the bubble the way it was last year, right? Where there's absolutely no fans allowed. I think they will, for boxing events, for smaller like club shows, they might encourage outdoors or partially outdoors, those type of venues. I think they'll be okay with a certain crowd number. They got to come up with that number. Maybe they cap it at 800. Maybe they cap it at 1,000. Maybe they cap it at 1,200 or 1,500 or whatever. And they say, okay, that's fine if the venue's big enough and you could space the seats out and you don't have to wear masks. But anything, any crowd count over that, you got to have your mask on, or I think it won't quite be a bubble, but there's going to be certain provisions that have to be met with public gatherings, not just sporting events or boxing, but for all public gatherings. I think that might be where we're going. I'm crossing my fingers. I'm hoping it doesn't happen. I'm hoping that the Delta variants and the new cases, that it levels off. Because school's back in session. I got two girls. One's in middle school, one's in high school. And, they've been in school for 2 weeks, and they get tested. The schools themselves, the LA Unified School District, test them every week. And they got to show their test results as they enter, and they got the mask on or whatever, but they're still showing up to school in mass. And it's worked out. I haven't heard about like a big bunch of new cases, at least in the LA Unified School District. So I think it is possible, for us to have large groups, large gatherings without it being a super spreader.
Right.
How about wrapping the ring itself and the two fighters in a bubble, and then letting everybody else out? Outside, cheer them on.
I don't think they're so much worried about the fighters. It's the fans.
Oh,
it's the spreading. It's the fans sitting around each other. Fans. Listen,
True.
even if they show up with masks and they have to sit like two seats apart from each other, once the beer starts flowing, you got to drop your mask to drink your beer, and the fights get going, and you start feeling good. You people gather and they start talking and spraying on each other. Some people sit when you talk. I'm one of those people. You know how it goes. That's why, bars, bars or clubs, that's where it really spreads, because after, once you get in there, and you get comfortable, especially a few drinks or whatever, you rub elbows, you get close, you talk, you forget about the social distancing. And if somebody has it, it's a very easily transferable disease, so
yeah,
it's that type of virus. It's sticky like that. So that's what people are worried about is fans. Just, fans is short for fanatic, and you get crazy, and, You know, they get into fights. You know what I mean? You know,
Everything.
boxing fans can be very rowdy, very emotional, and so yeah, that's what they're worried about. And my guess is they'll try to keep things, you know, a distance and start putting in certain like mask provisions if it's over a certain amount. You know what I mean? So if there's a big show at an indoor arena and it seats, you know, there's more than 5,000 there, they're going to insist that they're not just socially distanced inside the arena, but they have to wear the mask. They're going to say mask is mandatory. But there's ways around it. I mean, I think, you know, on July 9, Golden Boy had a really fun card at the Bank of California. You know, it's a soccer stadium.
That's right.
And you know, lots of space outdoors, and people were able to spread out. And the fact that it's not indoors and not enclosed, that makes it harder for people to transfer, you know, if they sneeze or cough or whatever. And a lot of people had their masks on regardless, even though it wasn't mandatory. So, you know, promoters are going to have to think outside the box, you know, from the club level all the way up to the elite level, the world championship level. And hopefully this pandemic levels off, and at some point we can get back to some normalcy.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that me and Mr. Trujillo there, we get into this debate here of right now. Well, Ring Magazine, man, is one of the most respected magazines when it comes to the pound for pound list.
Oh, thank you.
I know that you guys go through some, you know, yeah.
I got my own copy. Still in the plastic.
All right. Very long time.
Well, actually, the latest one is coming out real soon, but this is this actually went on sale yesterday. So you'll be able to find this at bookstores. This is the Julio Cesar Chavez special issue.
Nice.
Tribute to a great champion, obviously.
Cool.
Greatest from Mexico, which is saying a lot. But it's been on sale through the Ring shop at ringtv.com. But it's starting yesterday. It's you'll be able to see it on shelves. So whatever, CVS pharmacy, Barnes and Noble bookstore, newsstands, you know, that kind of thing. So
I'm gonna go get it tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
Same here.
it's a hot ticket. It's a hot ticket.
So going back to what I was saying, me and Trujillo, the champ here, you know, he's kind of, he sees both sides, but
Yeah,
Dave's a big Crawford fan.
right.
I'm a big Crawford fan too.
A lot of folks are.
But
A
when
lot
we
of fighters are. I've noticed that. A lot of fighters
absolutely
are
they
Crawford
respect,
fans.
they
Crawford
respect,
straight to the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
they respect his talent. I got to admit,
They like his versatility,
Yep.
and they like his attitude in that ring.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't take any prisoners.
No BS.
But he's not reckless. He's got the sweet science, and then when it's time to be a savage, he has the savage science. When
yes,
it's
true
time
buddy.
to close the show, he does it. And I heard that. I was around a couple months ago. I had the honor of kind of like hosting a talk that was filmed with Tommy Hearns, and joining us was James Toney, Buddy McGirt,
Nice.
and Zab Judah, and they all had great things to say about Terrence Crawford, because they say he reminds them of fighters from their era, in that he's a complete fighter, and he's versatile, and he's a boxer, and he's a fighter. And when it's time to really clamp down, bite on that mouthpiece and get guys out of there and take care of business, he does that too. And they really respect that. So they respect his character as much as they respect his skills.
Now you're saying they. What about
They.
you? What do you think? Where do you place him? Is this where me and Dave go at
I
it?
don't have him number. I think Canelo is number one, and I think number two, just like the Ring Magazine has it, I've got Inoue. I got the kid from Japan. I love Naoya Inoue. He won his first world title in, I think, his sixth pro bout at 108 pounds. And 2 bouts later, he won his second world title at 115 pounds. So he leapfrogged flyweight. And ever since he moved up to bantamweight, he's just fought top contenders and fellow title holders and a future Hall of Famer in Nonito Donaire. And their fight was sensational. It was fight of the year for 2019. So he's not just a great talent with great skills, because he's a puncher, but he's not like a Deontay Wilder, just like raw athleticism, raw power. It's his power comes from knowing, having proper technique, understanding distance, having great timing, and putting it all together. The old timers would say of like Joe Louis, they say he knew how to punch, talking about his form, his technique. He knew when to punch, talking about his timing, and he knew where to punch, the accuracy. And I see that in Inoue. He's surgical, whether he goes to the liver or the chin or the temple. He can counter punch. He can lead. He sets traps. I love his footwork. To me, he's a complete fighter, but he also makes for great fights. So it's not just a great talent who is not playing it safe in who he fights, but he either gets a sensational knockout, and if a fighter can stand in there with him, he makes for entertaining fights. And I think that's really important. To me, it's not just about skill. Quality of opposition has to be factored in there when you're talking about pound for pound. And accomplishments, obviously. And obviously this kid's got them. But also, making for great fights, making for compelling fights, creating fans, creating excitement. I think that's all part of it. And the kid gives it to us. And I would put Crawford right behind those two. And the only reason I don't have Crawford number one is ever since he moved to welterweight, and I realize it's not all his fault, but he's taken his foot off the gas pedal. It's kind of like a race. I think as a lightweight, he was sensational. He was bigger and stronger than everybody and more versatile. I love that he traveled to Scotland to win his first world title. I love that he won the Ring Magazine title when he outclassed Ray Beltran. I like that he stepped up to junior welterweight and cleaned out the division and became the undisputed champion. And at that point, he's at the front of the pack. Imagine a race, And then he steps up to welterweight. In his very first fight, he takes on the WBO title holder, Jeff Horn, who had won a controversial decision over Manny Pacquiao. But whatever, the dude shared 12 rounds with Manny Pacquiao, and they fought tooth and nail. So even if you thought Jeff Horn should have lost that fight, you still had to give him credit. He was a tough, rugged Australian scrapper, And Terrence Crawford stepped in there and said, "Give me the belt, bro. You're not in my league." And he didn't just outclass him. He wore him down and broke him down and stopped him. And at that point, that was a couple years ago, I'm thinking Terrence Crawford is the leader of the pack when you're talking about elite fighters. But ever since then, fight by fight, he's slowed up. He had the lead, and he either slowed down or he didn't speed up. And everybody else kept challenging themselves. Guys like Canelo Alvarez, right? So Alvarez, in that time, is winning the rematch with Golovkin, is beating Daniel Jacobs at middleweight, and then jumping up to light heavyweight and winning a world title there, which is very rare for a middleweight to go up to light heavyweight and beat a title holder. Really rare for a sitting middleweight champion to go up and beat a light heavyweight champion, but he did that. And he did it in style. And then he drops down to super middleweight and it says, you know what, I want to unify titles, and he beats Callum Smith and he beats the WBO belt holder, Billy Joe Saunders. And now he's lined up to fight Caleb Plant. And to me, okay, that's pound for pound right there. You are a threat in 3 different weight classes, all in the same period of time. And you're fighting top fighters. You're fighting the top fighters of 3 divisions, That's the accomplishment side of it. And then like I said with Inoue's done the same thing in his career, and he's done it really fast, within 20 fights, he's a 3-division title holder. And at bantamweight,
Unbelievable.
All of his fights have been against legitimate contenders. Yeah. And with the exception of Donaire, he's wiping them out. I mean, he's just busting he's annihilating them. And meanwhile, Terrence Crawford is fighting like Jose Benavidez and Amir Khan and, Kell Brook. And, Amir Khan and Kell Brook at one time were top talents and world title holders, but not now. You know what I mean? They're just way past it. They've been beat up. You know what I mean? Like Amir Khan has been beat up by too many guys. Same thing with Kell Brook, back to back, Gennady Golovkin and Errol Spence Jr. It's just, you know. So if you're busting up damaged goods, you know, you don't lose your place, but you don't gain. You know what I'm saying? And for me, Crawford has just been holding his place, but these other guys around him, they're challenging themselves against fellow elite fighters, and they're making for great fights, and they're doing big things. And so in my mind, they've overtaken him. And in my mind, he needs to do something, because I got to be honest with you, when he fights, I'm into it. The day he fights, I'm into it. I'm going to watch. I'm going to watch with a group of friends. We're going to enjoy ourselves, and we're going to marvel at his talent. But between his fights, I'm not even thinking about Terrence Crawford, because the fights that really interest me, obviously, you know, a showdown with Errol Spence, that hasn't happened. And we've been talking about it for too long. I'm tired of talking about it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And whatever, he hasn't faced, like, I mean, there's guys who fight for Top Rank who are top 140 pounders, and they haven't stepped up to challenge him, and you know he hasn't really thrown their names out there. He's kind of salty, you know what I mean? And when it comes to, you know, talking up his career and who's going to fight next, you know, I'm not going to say he's non-committal, but he's not Mr. Personality when it goes to selling himself to the general public. If you're a purist and you're a hardcore fan, you know who he is and you appreciate him. But if you're not, if you're a general sports fan and somebody brings up Terrence Crawford, or you watch Terrence Crawford knock over a mid-level dude and then hear his interview after the fight, you don't get excited. You know what I mean? He doesn't have that showmanship quality.
The charisma.
Wouldn't that be because of his promotion? I mean, when you're a boxer, you concentrate on being a boxer. Well, first of all, let me say pleasure to meet you, sir.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. And also,
likewise.
I'll tell you something, man. I just enjoyed hearing that whole spiel about how you broke it down with why you feel Terrence Crawford is dropping down in the ranks, not because of his skill level, but because of the activity of non-fights. So I agree with you there. But we're looking at it from the outside and from a fan base. And being from a fan base, we're looking at promotions. We're looking at contracts. We're looking at what we see things may happen, they may not happen. And for some reason with Terrence Crawford, we're not seeing these fights materialize. Now, why is that? Because I don't think Terrence Crawford himself fears anybody. I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, no, I'm not accusing him of ducking anybody. Right. I'm not saying he's out there forcing it. I don't feel like
isn't that for
I don't
promoter?
I don't feel like anyone's doing that these days. Yeah. I don't feel like any fighter is going. I think a lot of there's complacency, and maybe Mighty Mike can talk to this, because fighters from Mighty Mike's era, it didn't matter who was your promoter. It didn't matter what network you fought on. You were like,
didn't matter.
If you felt you were the best, you wanted that. And
everybody fought the best. Everybody fought
I mean, look at Fernando Vargas. You know, did he care that Felix Trinidad fought for Don King, or worry about being ready?
Nope.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like, no, I have to fight this dude.
I think,
and you could tell it was personal. But the thing about Vargas and a lot of fighters from that time, you know, let's say late 90s, early 2000s, anytime they had a media platform, and this is before social media, so they couldn't do it on their Twitter account or their Instagram, but if they were on a radio show, or if they were interviewed by a newspaper guy or a young internet guy like myself, they were talking about who they wanted to fight, and they meant business. And some of them were nice about. Oscar was nice about it when he said it. He wasn't disrespectful, you know, when he said, "Oh, I'd really love to share the ring with Pernell Whitaker," you know, and that Felix Trinidad, he sure looked dangerous, you know. He would actually talk him up. Oscar was smart like that. He would be like, "Oh, that Icorte, I heard he rehydrates to a middleweight. He's a welterweight, but on fight night, he's a middleweight. I heard he hits like a middleweight." boy, that'll be a good fight, you know. And but he wasn't just talking about it. The fight happened. You know what I mean? I mean, I've got Ring magazine.
Planting the seed.
I got a Ring magazine right here, and they're talking about he had just finished up. This is like early 1996, and Oscar abdicated his lightweight titles. He had 2 lightweight titles, unified lightweight titles, WBO and IBF, I think. And he moved up to 140 pounds. The natural fight was against this guy, Julio Cesar Chavez, Mexican superstar. He had the WBC title and a crazy record of 96-1-1, right? Well, it's an obvious fight to make, right? But I go to the ratings, right? I look at the Ring ratings. I was just looking at this Monday because Oscar had a press conference at the Golden Boy headquarters talking about the Vitor Belfort fight. And I was going to bring this up because I knew people were going to talk about today's game versus his era, right? Which, you know, we're talking 90s for Oscar and early 2000s. So when Oscar, see here, Oscar, I'm trying to find where he is in the rankings at this time. Oscar is number 4. He's number 4 at 140 pounds at junior welterweight. You guys can't see this, but I'll say right above him was Julio Cesar Chavez. This is at junior welterweight. Now I look at welterweight, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but number 1 is Pernell Whitaker. Pernell Whitaker is also number 1 pound for pound. Right. Number 2 at welterweight is Felix Trinidad. Felix Trinidad is number 4 pound for pound, right behind Oscar. Number 3 is Ike Quartey. And number 4 is Obakar. And I bring this up because between this magazine coming out in the next 3 years, between 1996 and 1999, he fights all these guys. He fights Julio Cesar Chavez. He fights Pernell Whitaker and Ike Quartey and Felix Trinidad, Obakar. He fights them all. So can you imagine today somebody who's ranked, you know, he was the top lightweight. He moves up to junior welterweight. And within the next 2 to 3 years, he's fighting the top junior welterweights and the top 4 welterweights. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine Teofimo Lopez fighting the top 4 welterweights in the next 2 or 3 years? I can't. And I'm not saying anything bad about Lopez because I know Lopez believes in himself, but it's like the business of boxing, it's not set up that way anymore. It's just, I can't even conceive it. The fighters aren't fighting enough, and the promoters and the platforms aren't working together enough to make these fights happen like that. So we don't get superstars like De La Hoya.
So would you call it ego amongst promoters and fighters that are holding all this back?
I would say no. I would say the business has changed in that in Oscar's day and in Mighty Mike's day, you had an HBO that did business with multiple promoters. They weren't exclusive to one promoter. And they said, listen, we're HBO. Our championship boxing is the best versus the best. If you can put together a fight that we think is worthy of HBO championship boxing, we're going to write you a fat check, a licensing fee for the rights to broadcast this fight live on our network. And we don't care if it's a co-promotion. We don't care if it's Don King, Main Events, Bob Arum, Golden Boy Promotions, or whoever. You know what I'm saying? And now the promoter has an exclusive deal with a platform, whether it's Eddie Hearn and Golden Boy with DAZN, or Bob Arum's Top Rank with ESPN, or the PBC with Showtime and Fox. So the networks are, you know, they're forming partnerships, and the promoters are going along with this because there's security in it. They're saying, okay, we have a 3-year deal with this network, so we know where all our fights are going to be. We don't have to hustle as much, is what, you know, basically. So I would say there's complacency on the side of the promoters and on the side of the fighters, because the fighters need to understand the promoters work for them, And if they want a certain fight to be made, they need to go and say, yo. And I'm going to tell you something. I used to hear this. I used to hear Fernando Vargas curse out folks, whether it was, Aduva or Gary Shaw with Main Events or Shelly Finkel, who was his co-manager. I used to hear him curse them out saying, I want this fight, and Kathy Duva has told me that Pernell Whitaker would say the same thing to her husband. He would say, I don't want easy fights. And her late husband, Dan, would say, but HBO is going to pay a lot of money for you to fight this guy. And Pernell said, give me a reason to train. I don't want this kid. I want to fight this champion. I want to fight this guy in a higher weight. I want to do this. And be like, okay, we'll make it happen. And I'll say the showdown between Pernell Whitaker and Julio Cesar Chavez would not have happened if Pernell Whitaker wasn't willing to go against the network. He had a contract with HBO. He basically broke that contract to go and fight a great Mexican fighter who was 87-0 at the time because he wanted to prove he was pound for pound the best. His legacy was on the line there. And if it cost him his contract with HBO, so be it. But he went into the Lions Den. He was willing to fight a Mexican fighter for the WBC title, which he held. He was the defending WBC welterweight title holder. But he had to know that Julio was the favorite son of Jose Suleiman and the WBC. And he had to know fighting Chavez in San Antonio, Texas was akin to fighting him in Mexico. He knew it was going to be 60,000 Mexicans in there. You know what I'm saying? And he knew that Don King had to be. He knew that Don King had to be the lead promoter, right? But Whitaker is just fighter. He's like, no, I think I can beat him. I'm doing it, and I don't give a fuck. And what I'm seeing too much now, and what I'm hearing too much from fighters, including Crawford, who I do respect, I hear them talking about the business. I hear them talking like, well, I'm not accepting 50%. It's got to be 60-40 or 70-30, or I'm the bigger draw, or that guy got to come on my network. And then the other guy, whether it's Spence or whoever, saying, no, what are you talking about? I'm a bigger star than you. You got to come to my network. And we get this bullshit. And that wasn't the case, in part because the business of boxing, the industry was different. The way it was set up was different. But I gotta believe, and I'm sorry, and maybe I'm biased with age, but I think the fighters were different. And maybe Mike can speak to this, but I think the fighters were they were different, maybe cut from a different cloth. Maybe their environment forced them to be a little bit hungrier. But I think the fighters of Anchando's time were hungrier. They were less complacent.
It was a lot more simpler, Doug, to be honest. As a matter of fact, my partner at the gym, co-worker is Joey Olivo, and we get into this all the time. We get into this all the time, and he'll say, you know what, today's fighters, they're all for the money. Everything's for the money. Everything's for the money. And mind you, Doug, you know as well as I do that us as fighters, we want to be okay financially. Yeah. We work day and night, 24 hours a day. Literally, maybe 20 hours. Okay, we got to sleep a little bit. But what I'm saying is, the point I'm trying to say is, the point I'm trying to get at is, these fighters now, they've smartened up and they're not taking anything less than what they believe they're worth. Now, if you have people applauding you, like they do, some of them do nowadays, up in their level, they're gonna want it more, and they know that they have that. And
the market favors that too. Yeah, if you have talent, if you are a legitimate prospect, let alone a legitimate world-class fighter, because the sport on the U.S. scene has been broken into like 3 or 4 different fiefdoms, right? There's a bidding war, right? Yep. If you're unsigned, you know what I'm saying, and you are legitimately world-class, Eddie Hearn might overpay you to come and fight on DAZN, right? Al Heyman might overpay you to come over and fight on Fox or Showtime. Yep. And likewise with Top Rank and ESPN. So, So here's the thing. Let's bring it back to Terrence Crawford. Crawford, awesome talent, showcased on HBO before HBO got out of business, and before HBO went out of business, out of the boxing business. Top Rank took its stable over to ESPN, a bigger platform, which is great. And not much longer after that, Terrence Crawford's his contract expired, his promotional contract expired, so he was going to be a free agent. And they knew that there were people out there with money, deep pockets. Yeah. Whether it's Eddie Hearn with the zone money, or Al Heyman, who's always well funded. You know what I'm saying? With Fox money or otherwise. And they knew to re-sign him, they had to give him, they basically had to overpay him, right? So he had a deal where he's making more than $3 million regardless of who he fights, right? He could fight me and he's going to make $3 million and he's not going to have to work very hard. I'm taking a dive,
Good.
And so I think, so they do that, but then I think sometimes there's buyer remorse with some of these promoters, right? And I think, Aram's at the age, Aram's about to be 90. So Aram's at the age, and he's got fuck you money anyways, but he's got a fuck you attitude also. But Aram's at the age where he ain't going to sugarcoat nothing. He's not going to kiss no ass. And so Aram's like, for what we're paying you, even when we go on pay-per-view, doesn't really cover the cost or whatever, and he's thinking, and he's also thinking where could that what can I do with that $3.5 million? How many other fighters could we sign, or how many other, great fights could we make that would make ESPN just as happy? You know what I'm saying? So I think there does become some resentment there. You know what I mean? In part just because of the way the business is, and there's always a love-hate relationship between the fighter and the promoter, because both are working their asses off and they're both like, you don't know how hard I work, to do what I do. You know what I mean? And the same thing happens with trainers and fighters and trainers and promoters and managers and promoters. That's just part of boxing. But I do think there's a little bit more of this sort of resentment between the power brokers and the fighters, because the power brokers are like, man, I know I'm paying you way over market value. Some of y'all still got an attitude. You know what I mean? And they're just like, they really do, and it's like that's definitely happening right now between Crawford and Top Rank. But you wonder, would it be any different if you were to cross the street, if you were to go to the PBC where they have all these world-class welterweights? And some people say yes, and other people say no, because even within the PBC, there are fights that don't happen. You know what I mean? Like Caleb Plant and David Benavidez are both PBC fighters, but they haven't fought. You know what I mean? They're both super middleweights, same weight class. They haven't fought. That's a natural fight. That fight didn't happen. Hasn't happened yet. Maybe it will happen. And it took so long for the PBC's top welterweights to fight each other, whether it's, we're talking about Keith Thurman fighting Sean Porter and Danny Garcia. It took so long between these fights to happen that it's like no one really cared. Like no one's really upholding Keith Thurman as some kind of great fighter, even though if you look at his record, you see who he's fought. His only loss is to an all-time great, Manny Pacquiao, and it was a good fight. But the fact that the infrequency of the fighters, showing just getting into a ring regardless of their fight, and the infrequency of the big fights, the fights that fans really want to see, no one's really gaining any momentum, to become that star. And I definitely, fighter activity is part of this equation. But I would have to think that if Terrence Crawford were fighting more than twice a year or once every 9 months, they'd have to work somebody in there. If everybody is fighting more often, there's more of a chance for some kind of round robin to happen between actual top fighters. And when that happens, I will tell you this: everybody rises. You know what I mean? Like the fact that Oscar was willing, to fight sometimes 4 and 5 times a year, and fight guys like Trinidad and Ike Corte, Shane Mosley. the whole win-loss thing didn't matter. It was like Oscar didn't win all those fights. You know what I mean? And some of those fights were close. And, so Ike Corte loses a split decision to Oscar De La Hoya. So what? Like, his stature rose.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Oscar loses a controversial decision to Felix Trinidad. So what? Like, his fan base did not abandon him. You know what I mean? Then he loses to Shane Mosley. All that did was make Shane Mosley a star.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, I wish. And here's the thing. They all made money. They were making crazy money, for that time. And, Mike, I know Joey probably tells you, yo, I got on a plane to Thailand for $20,000.
Yep. And that was like for
why?
a championship fight. And that was like for the biggest payday and whatever. I wouldn't say biggest payday, but I'm saying.
But for his weight class.
Yeah, a humongous payday,
Yeah.
So.
But he's thinking championship. He's just thinking, yo, I'm
going to do it. Exactly.
I'm gonna go into the Lions Den just to win that title.
Just to win the title. Right. It was the belt. It wasn't the money. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, that's exactly what he told me. He said nowadays there's fighters out there that just they care about the money. Boxing isn't the way it used to be. I said, Joe, I always have to tell him, Joe, but boxers don't want to be, they don't want to be poor. They want to look out for their family. They're fighting tooth and nail. They're sweating, blood, sweat, and tears in the gym, and all they want to do is just walk away. Okay, they get beat up, but at least they walk away with a little something for the family they're on, and that's all that matters. That's all that they want to do. That's all it all comes down to. So I could understand why these promoters are having such a hard time with these fighters. It's not that they're being egotistical. It's just that they want what's right for them. Now you have to scale it. You really don't know what's right for them at that point, but they want to make sure that they take a little something for the family, and that's all. And I completely understand.
Yeah, I do too. But here's the thing: if you make it all about the money, right, and you pass on opportunities, you can't complain if you're not a household name. You can't complain if you're. You know what I'm saying? You can't complain if people say you don't have much of a legacy, because the fact of the matter is you got to take some risks to create any sort of lasting legacy, and often to attract dedicated fans, And I'll go back to the whole losses thing. Fernando Vargas, he lost the big fights. He lost them. And they were hard losses. He took punishment, got beat up. And, you can maybe argue that after the Trinidad fight, definitely after the De La Hoya fight, that he was like 50% of what he was prior to those fights. But I'm telling you, it didn't matter where he fought and who he fought after that. After De La Hoya, he fought at the Olympic. He fought at like the Desert Diamond Casino in Tucson, Arizona. He fought like at the United Center in Chicago, but it didn't matter. He fought in parts of Texas. Wherever he fought, sold out. If the venue held 6,000 fans, he had 6,000 fans there. The ferocious squad. That held 10,000, 15,000, that's how many butts were in the seats, And after that, he wasn't always fighting really top fighters, you know what I mean? But he had paid his dues. Like that, the blood, sweat, and tears, Mike, you talk about blood, sweat, and tears in the gym. But those blood, sweat, and tears actually in the ring in front of people, they remember that, and they became loyal. Yeah, they really did.
I'm going to sum it up here real quick. Oh,
yeah, I was going to say, you had a quick question, Dave. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm going to sum it up real quick here. Back in the day when Mighty Mike Achando was fighting, when Oscar De La Hoya was fighting, when all the old school brothers were fighting, okay, it was about let's get down, let's get dirty. All right, nowadays it's about how much money can I get for each fight. So now these guys are making way too much money. Now I think that everybody needs to take a step back and take a page out of old Dana White's book there and understand how he's doing business. Because you know what? The way he's doing business is doing it right. And I'll tell you why. Because they're banging every month, sometimes twice a month.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He regulates everything. He's a one-man show. He's the man. All right. So what does boxing have to do? Create some kind of regulatory deal to start making things happen?
All in one?
Because I'll tell you what, there's too many divas out there right now making too much money, including We're looking at YouTubers now. Now, granted, the YouTubers are doing really good for us boxing coaches, man, out here. And I want them to keep on doing what they're doing.
I was going to ask you about that, Doug.
I got a bunch of kids coming on board that are playing nothing but computers all day long, and they're signing up for boxing.
Good.
You know what's funny?
That's great.
We're turning these little athletes, we're turning them into athletes, and they're shocking the world.
It'll be good for them.
These YouTubers are actually doing good for them. I'm tired of the diva. I want them to drop it. I want to see them bang. I only care to see people bang within the first 20 fights. After that, when they become divalicious, they need to bounce. I'm over it.
Divalicious.
They could join
I like
podcasts.
that.
They could join podcasts and just show off all the time.
I mean, that the boxing's fractured nature is its biggest enemy. It really is, and we're fractured, and it's fiefdoms and tribes. It's very tribal. Even the fans are tribal. Fans align themselves with promoters and platforms or certain fighters or whatever. It's like it's that fractured nature of the sport really holds it back. It keeps it a marginal sport, marginalized sport. I don't know if it could ever. If I don't think the industry itself would ever say, let's create a league or let's create a central authority, right? That's going to oversee rankings and approve matchmaking and regulate drug testing, right? Like I don't see the industry doing it themselves. That would have to be something like it would have to come from like the government.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is the government's got much bigger problems than boxing or sports. So I don't see it happening. But that is the huge strength that the UFC does have, is that it's a combat sport. It's MMA that's run like a league. And it has a commissioner. It's got its commish is Dana White, the president of the UFC. And he controls the amount they get paid, and he's, what he says goes, and there are folks who complain about it, and a lot of them have legitimate gripes, but it does run like clockwork. It does run. It is organized, right? It's not disorganized, and that helps its popularity because people can count on the best fighting the best and fights leading to other fights, whereas boxing, man, even if a fight gets announced, we don't know if it's going to make it to the finish line, And believe me, I know that from editing a monthly magazine. We're like, okay, are we putting Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua on this cover? Is it going to happen? No, it's not. It's going to be Fury Wilder. I'm like, well, is that going to happen?
Yeah.
That's why I'm happy to do these special issues, man, because Cesar Chavez is going to be great no matter what. No matter what happens, it's like, no, he had his career and he was great. Enough said. No arguments. Yeah.
So Doug, I'm going to ask you my last question, and then each one of the gentlemen will ask theirs. My last question is, do you think we have way too many weight divisions, categories, being at 17, I believe, right?
Yeah, 17.
Is it
18 if you count Bridgerweight.
Oh, see? Okay. I think tomorrow we'll have 19.
I don't think you do.
But I'm saying, let's say the 17 weight class. Do you think we have way too many? And that might be a problem also?
We do have too many, but I don't think that's the problem. I don't think the number of weight classes or even the number of world titles that are out there, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that we're not getting quality matchups regardless of the level of the fighters. Now, everybody can't be pound for pound elite. Everybody can't be world class. But a good fight is a good fight, whether it's a 4-round club fight, whether they're male or female, whether they're teenagers or men in their 50s. If they're evenly matched and it's the right style matchup, it's going to be compelling. And I think I think the networks need to be more concerned about quality than quantity. And quality will outshine quantity of belts and weight classes. And I always say, if a fight is a good fight, a really good fight, it's a good matchup, people aren't going to care if they are a super flyweight or a junior flyweight or a super middleweight or a junior middleweight. They're not going to care, And I mean, I'm a bit of a purist. I'm definitely an amateur historian, and I love the ideal of 8 weight classes, right? And the glamour divisions, welterweight, middleweight, heavyweight, you know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, some of the greatest fighters we've seen, and some of the greatest fights we've seen have come in these divisions that weren't even in existence until the 80s. Cruiserweight, I've seen the greatest fights at cruiserweight, and the reason is because Evander Holyfield was a cruiserweight. He's a great fighter, and he was going to fight everybody. And if you didn't know anything about the cruiserweights, if you followed his career, you knew he was the man, and you knew that there were good fights because all of Evander Holyfield's fights at cruiserweight were great, and he unified all 3 major belts and was the undisputed champion. And once he conquered cruiserweight, then he stepped up to heavyweight to the glamour division. You know what I mean? But if you were watching those fights of Holyfield after the 84 Olympics, you were like, I don't care what he weighed. You were a Evander Holyfield fan. You didn't care that he was fighting in a new division. And the same thing with super middleweight. Roy Jones Jr. was a super middleweight. James Toney was a super middleweight. These guys are once in a lifetime boxing talents, once in a lifetime athletes. They made the division, and it wasn't the other way around. And the same thing with belts. Once upon a time, people didn't recognize the WBO belt, but when Oscar De La Hoya won that belt, and Riddick Bowe won it, and
I won.
Yeah, Mighty Mike Anchondo won the 130-pound belt in Texas.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like it's not about it's about the fighters, really. And I think networks need to chill on demanding that every main event and co-feature bout has a strap on the line. Nobody cares about a WBA interim title or a WBA whatever, gold belt or regular belt or super whatever, or a WBC diamond belt or silver belt, or never mind about the belts. Make it about the matchmaking. Make it about the matchmakers. Because there's still really good matchmakers out there. But the thing is promoters are worrying more about delivering title bouts than they are about delivering good matchups. Yeah. And if they put the focus on the matchups, you're gonna deliver good boxing programming. You're gonna make your core audience, the hardcore fans, happy. They're gonna buzz, and then casual fans are gonna pick up on that buzz because that's how it works. You know what I mean? A fighter is an underground fighter, an underground sensation that only appeals to hardcore fans until they get their break, and then they become stars. At one point, Sugar Shane Mosley was underground. And if you knew about him, you knew he was a motherfucker. And when he got his chance, he was going to shine. And when that happened, now casual fans know about him. But you gotta be in good fights. And I'll say this, when he stepped on, he couldn't just get onto HBO's, their Boxing After Dark, never mind championship boxing, unless he fought a tough opponent. His first fight on HBO was the IBF title, his first title shot, an IBF title holder from South Africa named Philip Holiday. And nobody had an easy time with Holiday. And he won that fight, didn't look great. And Lou DiBella told him, go fight on basic cable. And when we think you're ready, we'll bring you back. And he did. He went back to like USA Network or ESPN, the hell out of some guys, and they're like, okay, you're looking like a badass. Come on back to Boxing After Dark. And I think they put him in with the guy named Demetrius Sabayo, or some tough guy from South America. And he beat the hell out of this dude, and he was exciting. And they're like, we want you back. And they brought him back against John Molina, and he knocked out John Molina. And they're like, you know what? You're an HBO fighter now. But the thing is for him to make his name and to prove himself to HBO, he had to be in tough fights. He had to fight real fighters. And that made his name among the hardcore fans, but it let the network executives know that he's the real deal, and it helped bridge that gap from being underground fighter to somebody who's going to fight somebody like Oscar De La Hoya. And that's what we need. We need network executives like Lou DiBella was. And DiBella went on to become a promoter because he knew the business that well. But DiBella, he could be a great matchmaker. Like, he was a network executive who understood how to build opponents for well-known fighters and how styles worked out in the ring to where the fans are going to get a good fight. And that to me is a good programmer. And I think that's what's really missing from a lot of these networks is a network executive that understands boxing on that level. And I think that's more important than the number of weight classes or belts or any of that other crap. I think good fights solves everything. Good fights set up greater fights.
I agree.
Ideal.
True.
We got a couple more minutes, and I got 2 more questions right here. Dave Trujillo, ask the next question.
Okay. Do you see a future for Tuesday night fights or Thursday night fights coming back?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the way it is right now is we're getting these crowded Saturdays, and it's the boxing fan, the hardcore boxing fan base that watches everything. There's not enough of them to go around. So if you've got overlapping cards, you're forcing these fans to choose, and the others they'll watch on demand. You know what I mean? And I found myself in that same position. I think it was August 14, and there was 2 shows on DAZN. I think Victor Ortiz was fighting, and then you had Showtime with Casimiro Rigondeaux, and then you had ESPN with Joshua Franco and one of the Maloney twins. And you can't watch them all. There was a Thompson boxing card that night, and I was working it. And even when I got home from working that Thompson boxing show, I was like, what do I watch first? I can't even, I'll be up all night if I watch them all. But it's like you can't. Boxing shouldn't do that to itself. You're cannibalizing itself. It's not big enough. There's not a big enough fan base to do that. So I think it makes all the sense in the world for some of these big shows to go on Fridays. And if you don't have well-known super champions facing each other in the main event, man, put that on a Tuesday or a Thursday. You can definitely do that. And I think some of these programmers and definitely the promoters are thinking about doing it. And from a fan's perspective, I like it. I wouldn't mind some weeks where the big fight happened on a Thursday or Friday so that I've got Saturday to spend with my family and do something. That sucks when there's like family events happening, somebody's birthday or whatever. And I'm like,
yeah, I don't like when family events get in the way either.
It makes me the bad. I hate being the bad guy, man.
My wife
it'd be nice sometimes to have Saturdays off, to be quite honest, as a member of the media and just as a fan, just to have what? We're going to go to the mall, and go to dinner, just family time, on the weekend, So I definitely think there's an opening for that. And I do think some of these promoters are giving it serious consideration. Definitely for developmental level cards, definitely for club shows and developmental cards. They're looking at Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I think back in the day, the huge fights, the fights of the century, your Ali Frazier's, that stuff was happening on Mondays,
Prime Ticket. I remember Prime Ticket. I think on
Mondays,
Thursday.
right?
Was it
Or
Monday?
Thursday. Yeah.
I
remember Forum Boxing used to have shows during all kind of different days of the
USA
week.
boxing.
I loved it, man. I loved it.
Yeah.
That's a good question, Dave. How about you, champ? Finish it off with the last question.
Doug, all I want to ask, because I want to ask for the fans, they asked me to ask you, and I said, all right, I'm going to talk to them. I'll ask them and see. What's the fondest memory you have of going out with myself, Edwin Valero, and Daniel Ponce de Leon?
Oh,
What's the fondest memory?
The
Because
fondest.
that
You know
was-
what?
that was-
I'm gonna say it's fond. You know what? It's fond and it's bittersweet. But I remember traveling to New York City for was supposed to be Edwin Valero's HBO debut. He was fighting on HBO Latino, and they found this real rugged Dominican for him to fight. I forget the dude's name. He fought Humberto Soto a couple of times. What did he fight? And he fought him. He fought some good fighters. I forgot Lorenzo. I forgot, but nobody could knock this dude out. So they say, let's put him to the first round knockout artist and see if he can get out of the first round. And Valero, the MRI exam, it revealed something, and he admitted that he had surgery, that he had surgery on his cranium, right? And so the commission didn't let the fight go on, and they suspended his license, which effectively banned him from fighting in the U.S.
Yep.
But it was crazy because Mike, you were there, and Daniel Ponce de Leon was there, and I don't know what the hell happened. You guys went out on the town. First of all, I remember we get there, and you guys are West Coast guys.
Yeah.
And it's snowing, and you're like little kids. You're like, oh, I want to eat the snow, and I'm like, I don't know how clean that is, bro.
Snow angels. We're doing snow angels.
And you guys drop on the sidewalk, and we're making snow angels, and that was really special to see that. but you guys went out into town. You went into some yuppie bar.
Up at Jimmy's Corner, isn't it?
Well, there was Jimmy's Corner. But there were some higher scale bars that you went to, and something happened. You guys, one of you offended the other. I'm thinking you pissed off Daniel.
No,
you guys were gonna fight.
It was Daniel and no, it wasn't Valero because Valero was busy upstairs. So
Valero was preparing for the fight.
It was me and Ponce. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys. So here I get a call like, Doug, I think our fighters they went AWOL. They're not in the hotel. And I just got a panic call from someone saying that they're getting ready to fight each other. And I'm like, what? I wanted to go with one of De La Hoya's uncles. Because if you remember, Joel De La Hoya Sr. was the manager of Edwin Valero.
That's right.
Or co-manager. Yeah. Right. So he was there, and he had either some brothers or some cousins or whatever that were there that had lived in New York or had worked in New York, and they were there, and they said, come on, let's go. And before this becomes an incident, I want you with me. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I ain't going to break you.
Just come on over.
But there was a blizzard. There was a blizzard, and it was hard getting there, finding a cab. It's in the middle of the night, but we go to some bar. It's like an upscale Irish bar or whatever. And, we missed it. Whatever happened, you guys squashed it. But here's what I heard. I heard you guys had cleared some stuff out. You took your shirts off, and you're all getting ready to John Sullivan. Getting ready to bare knuckle it, man.
Half naked, yeah. Half naked at Jimmy's Corner. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but we caught cooler heads prevailed. We get you in there, and I don't know. You got to remind me of this. But did Ponce say, "Listen, we got to squash it. We got to be blood brothers"?
I got the scar. I got the scar on my hand.
Right.
Where he bit me.
Right.
Unbelievable.
So, Daniel's primal. So he bites you, and you got to rub hands to become blood brothers.
Unbelievable.
And I'm thinking, fighters are fucking crazy, man. They really are different. They're a different breed, man. And Joe Hernandez said, "Oh, Doug, don't worry about this. This happens. Like I take all three to each other's fights because I want them to support each other. But whoever's not fighting, the other two, they get into a fight.
We fight each other, yeah.
Yeah, because Valero and Daniel got into a fight when you were in Texas, and you're fighting for the WBO title.
That's right. That's
right. And Daniel's a fighter. He bit Valero's ear. So
he bit his ear.
But yeah.
That's
but
crazy.
Here's what I recall was that, like, you guys were like kids traveling. When you traveled, you were very excited. When you got to New York, you were so excited being around the buildings, being in the cold weather, being around the people in New York, because they're different. In New York, they're walking and they got this different energy. And and you amazed me because literally as soon as we got off the plane, you were like, you weren't intimidated at all. Like you started talking to strangers, right? You talked to this pretty lady who wound up having a boyfriend, but it's a mature lady, like, you know, I'm going to say like 35, 40, but smoking hot. And you're saying, hey, I'm Mighty Mike and Chondo. I'm a fighter. I'm a boxer. I'm going to be a world champion. And she's like, what? Really? Boxing?
Of course.
Like, and you're like, yeah. And you start, you're rapping to her. And within 5 to 10 minutes, she is a Mighty Mike and Chondo fan, right?
Why wouldn't she be? Come on.
So we leave, right? So we leave. I'm watching you. I'm like, man, Mike is crazy, man. We leave, but I'm keeping my eye on her because I saw she had a boyfriend or some significant other, a dude, big, tall. You know, they're white guy. You know, white people, big, tall, 6 foot white guy in a coat, and he looked like a professional, like a Wall Street type. And he was looking at magazines or whatever, and he goes over to this lady. She's like, whatever his name is, you know, Kenneth, you'll never believe who I just met. And he's like, who? He's like, Mighty Mike and Chondo, the fighter. And he's like, what? Who? He's like, yeah, no. He's going to be fighting soon. We got to go to one of his fights. I was like, wow.
That's
like
awesome.
Magic, man.
Of course, I invited him.
Did you? Yeah, man. I was like, man, Mighty Mike, you know, he's a prize fighter, but he would make a very good publicist and promoter because he understands people. That's the bottom line.
That's what it's all about, gentlemen.
That personal connection.
Exactly what you just said, Dougie. It's all about the people. Yeah. And that's how we got such a great time. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate the time.
2003. Time flies. Not quite 20 years ago, but 18 years ago.
18 years
ago. That's a memory that I have of you and your cohorts that it's like I say, it's bittersweet because of what happened to Edwin Valero.
Yeah.
Bittersweet because, you know, there was some strife and all, but very exciting just being around you guys because you guys are all basically, you're really prospects, you know.
At the
but
time,
Joe Hernandez had told me, no, they're all going to win world titles. You watch. He was right. He was right.
He was
right. He said, they're all going to win world titles. I said, really? You know, they're that good? He's like, yeah. He said, you know, and they're like brothers. And I said, he said, you have brothers. I said, yeah. It's like, you guys used to fight all the time. I said, yeah, we fought all the fucking time. You're right. He's like, when they fight, you know, afterwards, when you get home, I take them to a church and I have a priest talk to them and the priest blesses them and makes them squash the beef, you know. And he said he had a priest talk to you guys and say, you know what? You're all going to be champions. You know what I mean? One day. And it did. It happened. But it's that journey watching, you know, basically young adults really mature into men as well as contenders and then world champions. It's very special. It's very exciting. And it's really an emotional roller coaster.
That whole thing I just heard right now, that's like a couple of chapters of a book or
I know, Doug.
If it happened in a movie, people would think we're exaggerating though.
No, Doug, I mean, unbelievable. What a throwback. Thank you, Doug. That was awesome.
Doug, we thank you, man. We've done this for 1 hour and 3 minutes and 23 seconds. And
all right.
I had a blast.
Leave them wanting more. Yeah.
Hey, that's what I was going to tell you, man. Can we make this a periodical event here?
Of course.
Absolutely. Bring me back.
Talking to you, man. We love talking to you. We thank you for your expertise. And thank you for joining us at Rolling with the Punches. And we'll see you next time. Stay on board. Mighty Mike wants to talk to you. I'm just going to cast off here.
Thank you, brother.